Hello, welcome to PCAP's Native Prairie Speaker Series. My name is Mroz-Sailer, and I am the Stewardship Coordinator with Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan, or PCAP. Today, Paige Kuzmarski, Social Media and Invasive Species Technician with the Alberta Invasive Species Council, will be speaking about an overview of the Alberta Invasive Species Council and their biocontrol program in Alberta. I'd like to start by stating we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations and communities past and present. For millennia, they have worked to protect these landscapes and the life these areas sustain. I would like to thank these original caretakers and acknowledge the ongoing work and presence of Indigenous peoples in Canada today. Before we begin, I'd like to note that PCAP's Native Prairie Speaker Series is a monthly presentation about anything to do with Native Prairie conservation or species at risk. And you can join us on April 7th for a webinar by Environment and Climate Change Canada about tracking and monitoring terns in Saskatchewan. And next week, we'll be hosting Prairie's Got the Goods Week. It's a week-long series of webinars about ecological goods and services from native prairie ecosystem and wetlands. You can register for these webinars on the PCAP website, and all past presentations can be found on the PCAP YouTube channel, and this webinar will be uploaded there in the near future. A reminder to all of our listeners out there, if you have any questions during the presentation, just type it into the questions section of the webinar dashboard at any time. If you are on a cell phone, you can send your question by chat to the organizer, and questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. I'd like to take a moment to note that financial support for today's webinar is provided by our presenting sponsors, Eco-Friendly Sask, Enbridge, Information Services Corporation, SaskTel, Wildlife Habitat Canada, and Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association. In-kind support has been provided by the Alberta Invasive Species Council. And a bit about today's presenter. Paige graduated in 2017 with a bachelor's degree in biological science from MacEwan University, where she first introduced the invasive species through efforts with multiple research projects with garlic mustard and forest tent caterpillars. Soon after, she started various positions with Alberta Agriculture and Alberta Environment Parks over the next 4 years. In 2021, she joined the AISC as a social media and invasive species technician, where she continues to foster her love of the outdoors and hopes to assist in educating Albertans on invasive species and their management. So I am pleased to pass it over to Paige.
Hi, thank you. Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that, Caitlin. We'll go ahead and get started. So just doing a little overview of the Alberta Invasive Species Council. I might refer to it as AISC throughout the presentation. A little bit of a mouthful there, but as well talking about our biocontrol release program in Alberta. So you guys are neighbors. Yeah, and I'm Paige. Let's get started. So just a little outline of the presentation. What are invasive species? We'll kind of just do a brief overview, a little bit about the Invasive Species Council in Alberta, and then of course our biocontrol release program. So what are invasive species? They're plants, animals, invertebrate species that are not from here and can cause harm in their new environment. These species arrive to new environments through planes, trains, ships, pretty much anything, as well as accidental and intentional releases, which makes it really easy for them to get around. So what makes these species invasive is that they have few or no natural predators, and they can cause harm to the ecosystem that they're introduced to. So not all non-native species become invasive, but the ones that do cause harm because they compete with native species for resources and thrive at the expense of the local ecosystem. So actually, invasive species are the second greatest threat to biodiversity after habitat loss and can cost millions, billions of dollars per year to manage and control. So here we have a few examples. I just wanted to show you guys. You might be familiar with wild boar in Saskatchewan. They're also in Alberta. They're not from here. They're native to Eurasia. They've been brought over as a new source of livestock, which can destroy croplands and have the potential to transfer disease to livestock, wildlife, and humans. In the center, this one's near and dear to me. It's kind of what I started my career in. This is flowering rush. This one's native to Europe, but it was brought over as a garden ornamental. It quickly dominates aquatic ecosystems with dense monocultures, leads to decreased dissolved oxygen levels, increased algal blooms, reduced water quality basically for anyone that uses it recreationally, wildlife, fish, anyone and everyone. We also have Chinese mystery snail on the right. These are native to Asia and have been brought over for culinary purposes, as well as through the pet trade industry, since they're quite big in size. This snail can impact the growth and abundance of native snail species. They're an intermediate host to several parasites and diseases, and they can clog water intake pipes as well as other submerged equipment. So in Alberta, we actually have three main legislative acts that regulate our invasive species. We have the Alberta Weed Control Act, which regulates 75 prohibited and noxious weeds, one of which is in the center there, flowering rush. We have the Agricultural Pest Act for about 5 different agricultural pests. Again, one of those is the wild boar at large. And then we have the Fisheries Alberta Act that regulates 52 aquatic species. Again, flowering rush and Chinese mystery snail are regulated on these acts. So these don't encompass all the species on our watch list, but they prioritize the species with the most significant impacts. So some of the ones that would still be on our watch list would be something like goldfish, which we have a big problem in Alberta with. So of these impacts, we have quite a few, and they're very concerning. So it can harm our environment, economy, and human health. So keeping with the same examples from the last slide, wild boar on the left there, we can see in a crop field that is completely leveled it in some areas. Damage caused by wild boar at large is estimated to be about 1.5 billion in the States each year. We don't have any Canadian estimates, but I would assume it'd be something similar. Flowering rush in the middle again has completely overrun this lake with about 17 kilometers thick of the plant. You can literally walk on it. I have done so. I feel invincible and like Jesus, but it is that thick. So dense stands happen quite often in irrigation ditches and water bodies, and really reduce the water availability. Again, decreases the oxygen for fish, interferes with recreational activities, and increases in algal blooms. As well, the plant roots of this species break off really easily, so it can get caught in your propellers and be transferred to other lakes, which we definitely don't want. And then again on the right, we have Chinese mystery snail. This one is edible, which is again why it was brought over, but can impact health as it's an intermediate host to multiple parasites and diseases. So as we mentioned before, invasive species enter through a variety of pathways. They cause economic, environmental, and human harm. And sometimes through these pathways and this harm, it's intentional or unintentional. The job of the Alberta Invasive Species Council is to educate people and make them aware of these species, how to prevent their introduction and stop the spread in and around the province. So the single most effective way to manage invasive species is to prevent their establishment in the first place. One of those ways is to do it through education. So a bit about the council here. We were established as a nonprofit society in Alberta in 2006. Initially, we were called the Alberta Invasive Plant Council, and the name changed in 2013 to reflect a broader scope and to include all invasive species taxa. So since that time, the council has worked to protect Alberta from the impacts of these invasive species. As a nonprofit, we have a board of directors from a variety of different backgrounds. There's about 14, I believe, right now. And then we have 2 full-time staff, one of which is me. And we receive our funding from a variety of sources, such as grants, sponsorships, and donations. So our vision for the Alberta Invasive Species Council is prevention inspired, Alberta protected. So we aim to do this by providing leadership on invasive species management, by increasing awareness, serving as a respected source of credible information, fostering partnerships, engaging and empowering Albertans to prevent, detect, and take action against invasive species. So with this in mind, we have quite a few resources. We have a new-ish website with over 150 fact sheets on invasive plants, animals, diseases, you name it, we probably have it. If we don't, you can always ask us and submit a form to request a new sheet be developed. We send out quarterly newsletters. We host free online webinars like this one. Currently, we're helping revise the Alberta Weed ID Act, which is an identification guide for all the species, all the listed species. As well with this one, we're making it a little more common and easy to use. So we have a couple common weed species that you would normally see out on a walk or something, rather than just the listed ones. As well, we have a library of invasive species photos, resources, videos. We have our annual conference, which is March 14th to 18th, so in 2 weeks. So if you're interested in taking that in at all, I definitely encourage you to register. Link would be in the handout on the Go web page there that we have. Then we also support several different campaigns to help with our goal and educate the public about invasive species. So some of these you may have seen before, but those campaigns that I mentioned are buy local, burn local. So we ask that you do not move firewood more than 80 kilometers, as insects and tree diseases could be spread. We have the Don't Let It Loose program, which is actually a nationwide initiative to remind individuals to not dump their pet aquariums into the wild. We have the Certified Weed-Free Forage program, which currently we're trying to revitalize in the province. We used to have it, kind of died down, and now we're trying to bring it back to life. Basically, producers get their fields inspected for invasives, and inspectors will certify the forage for the market. We also have EDMAPS and EDMAPS Pro. So EDMAPS is a free invasive species reporting app for anyone and everyone to use. You map, track, and report invasives on it. Definitely encourage you guys to download it. It's a Canada-wide app, so definitely useful for anyone and everyone. We also have EDMAPS Pro, which is another reporting app, quite similar, kind of the sister one to EDMAPS, but it's used more for professionals and invasive species managers that would go back to a certain site to control it. Also free to download though, so if you guys work with that, another one to use. We also have the Clean Drain Dry campaign that we support. You probably have seen this at our provincial borders. This ensures that people clean, drain, dry their gear before moving to a different water body. Play Clean Go is a North American-wide campaign to stop invasive species kind of in your tracks. It's similar to Clean Drain Dry, but this applies to any outdoor activity like rock climbing, biking, horse riding, honestly, you name it. We want you to enjoy your time, but clean your gear before leaving on your way. Squeal on pigs there. More and more provinces are adopting this campaign, as wild boar at large are one of the most invasive species in North America. This campaign was actually shared from Montana, who is currently wild boar free, but it acts as a fun way for people to remember to squeal or report wild boar, sometimes also called feral pigs, to authorities, so eradication can be done in an effective and strategic manner, as hunting is not a viable control method for this species. Finally, we have the Grow Me Instead, or Be Plantwise, where gardeners have suggested alternatives to common invasive plants found in their gardens and horticulture industry. But that's not all. Another one of our resources is our Biocontrol release program. So what is biocontrol? It's used to control and suppress populations of pest species using the invasive plant's natural enemies, so insects or pathogens, from the plant's place of origin. So the goal is to reduce the invasive plant's population to below damaging levels, which can be defined as either environmental or economic levels of damage. The AISC uses host-specific insects, like these two pictured here, to control invasive plants in the province. So on the left, we have the seed head weevil of spotted knapweed. This controls invasive spotted knapweed. And then on the right, we have spurge beetles, which control invasive leafy spurge. So these agents, as well as others, are used and are proven and tested for years prior to release to ensure their target is only the pest species of interest. So these agents, once released, are self-sustaining and require little input after releasing, which makes them a pretty awesome tool for pest management. However, biocontrol releases have not always been successful and have gone through some of their own turbulences over the years. So we've learned some lessons with the good, the bad, and the ugly for biocontrol. So on top, we have hound's tongue root weevil. Hound's tongue is a plant that's toxic to cattle and horses and has these really annoying Velcro-like burrs that stick to basically anything. So this agent was released in 1977 and continues to be released to date. It's actually so successful in southern Alberta that this year the council has decided to stop releasing this agent since populations of hound's tongue that we find commonly have this species already present. So this is really good. Next, we have the multicolored Asian lady beetle, which is native to Japan and was introduced in the 1970s. This and other species were brought in for insect control. So these introduced species have done well, but it appears our native lady beetle populations are declining, which is not ideal, or as we have here, bad. But then we have the ugly, and quite literally ugly. So this cane toad, 102 of them were brought from Hawaii to Australia to control beetles in sugarcane crops. They were released in 1935 there. After the release, a ban was put in place on releasing more toads so that the effects could be studied. The ban was lifted a year later in 1936, and by the following year, 62,000 toadlets were released into the wild. Unfortunately, they have proved ineffective in controlling pests in sugarcane fields. So while they are bad, not only can they not help with control these pests, they're capable of poisoning predators that try to eat them, as they exude a toxic substance. And this substance is also deadly to humans. And they continue to spread across over 2,000 kilometers from the site they were released 74 years beforehand. So that 2,000 kilometers is about the same distance between Vancouver and Winnipeg. So they've definitely made their journey hopping around. But biocontrol, to pull and go on the brighter side, is now a lot more rigorous in regards to the approval process. So import and release of biocontrol agents in Canada is very regulated, meaning the insects are studied rigorously and go through a robust approval process through the Canada Food Inspection Agency, or CFIA. So they ensure there's no risk to off-target species. This process takes about 10 years and millions of dollars. There is essentially no concern to the off-target damage for any of the agents that we release. And if you were, as I mentioned, our annual conference next week, planning on taking that in, we have Dr. Rose de Klerk-Float speaking on her research for common tansy biocontrol agent, as well as oxeye daisy. So those would be new to us and definitely worth a listen. But she will likely be providing a brief overview of the approval process then. But generally, you kind of submit a petition for release for review. Then it's approved by a biocontrol review committee. and then they submit a recommendation to the CFIA to approve the agent or not. Then the agent is pushed to testing in lab and field settings by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So Dr. de Klerk floats area. There's a link to this process as well in the handout attached to the webinar here, if you guys are interested. But let's talk about Alberta's biocontrol release program. So there's a little bit of background we have here. It started in 2001 as a collaboration between the Weed Biocontrol research team at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So they do the research and testing, and as well as several agricultural fieldmen in southern Alberta. So they were doing the releases and fieldwork. So it's a very unique partnership, very unique program. It's entirely funded by our participants and operated now by the Alberta Invasive Species Council as a service for invasive plant managers and landowners to purchase agents in conjunction with expert consulting. So the first target species was actually invasive leafy spurge. This plant crowds out native species, produces a sap that is toxic to cattle, as well that sap creates a photosensitivity when in contact with human skin. But since starting with leafy spurge, the program has expanded to working with over 39 different organizations, whether that be municipalities, individual landowners, all the way to Alberta parks, so federal partners. We supply biocontrol agents for their invasive plant populations. From this ongoing support, and of course over the years, we have been able to offer additional agents for release. So this includes hound's tongue, which as I mentioned isn't offered anymore, Dalmatian toadflax, spotted and diffused knapweed, as well as Russian knapweed. So since starting this program, we have released and monitored biocontrol agents at over 1,300 locations in Alberta, and that number continues to grow and will in the future as we continue to expand and hopefully get new agents. And currently we are even in the works of some grant applications to get the biocontrol for common tansy and oxeye daisy with Agri-Food Canada, as I mentioned, as well as CABI. So that's the Centre for Agriculture and Bioscience International. Again, will be talked about at our conference. So I just kind of wanted to give you a quick glimpse of what our agents look like that we offer. In the top right there, we have knapweed root weevil and knapweed seed head weevil. So I'm not going to try and pronounce the scientific names of these as I'm already stumbling on some of my words, so it'll just be a gong show. But so the seed head weevil is on the left there, and then the root weevil is on the right. This is a photo, the one on the right there is actually a photo of the root weevil larvae. But the larvae evolve into a similar looking weevil, just like that seed head one on top there. So the seed head weevil lays eggs in the flower heads of spotted and diffused knapweed. And the larvae eat the seeds, the adults feed on the leaves. And then for the root weevil, they lay their eggs on the root crowns, and then the larvae kind of tunnel through the taproot and expose that root to infection. So these two agents are directed at diffused and spotted knapweed, and they can actually be used in conjunction, so released at the same site, as they attack different parts of the knapweed and will not compete with one another. So that's pretty cool, kind of work together. Below those two, we have Dalmatian toadflax stem weevil, another weevil, and this one leaves kind of a distinct shot hole pattern on the leaves and stems after emerging, and that will stunt the plant growth. On the bottom right, we have Russian knapweed gall wasp. So this one lays eggs in the plant stems where they create kind of like a tumor growth or gall. So that's circled there on the screen. This draws nutrients away from the plants and reduces its ability to grow as well. Above that one there, we have leafy spurge beetles. So the Aphthona species, which I will go into a little further detail here, since it was our first one. that we've released, and honestly the one that I'm most familiar with, which is the leafy spurge beetles. So I got involved with the Biocontrol program this past summer after the previous coordinator moved to a federal position. So we didn't have a lot of time, I guess, before the season started. So we only released the one agent last year, which was the leafy spurge beetles. So as I mentioned, this was the first agent that we used and targeted for biocontrol release. Leafy spurge is classified as a noxious weed in Alberta under the Weed Control Act. It's a perennial plant with an extensive creeping root system that can be up to, I can't remember specifically, I think it's like up to 10 meters deep, but it's very extreme root system. And furthermore, spreads by shooting its seeds meters away. So not only roots, but we also have the seeds for this plant. Leafy spurge is not only difficult to control, it's also harmful to most livestock and an irritant to human skin from that milky sap that it produces. It's very prominent in southern Alberta as well as across the province, but we find that in southern Alberta, that's where most of our releases are done, as well as where our collection sites are. So about leafy spurge beetles specifically, obviously they're used to target leafy spurge. There are two species that we use, Aphthona lacertosa and Aphthona nigroscutis, basically black and brown leafy spurge beetles. So these beetles both feed on the leaves and flowers of leafy spurge, limiting the plant's ability to grow. They're very small, about 3 to 5 millimeters, and can lay about 200 eggs in the soil. So these will hatch and burrow in the soil where the larvae overwinter, and then feed on the spurge roots, which is where the majority of the plant damage comes in, until emerging in the springtime. So collection for us for these spurge beetles occurs about the end of June, beginning of July, and we want to collect the adults. So you'll see those black and brown beetles on the screen there. The informational sheet above that photo is on the right is a quick few pages identifying obviously the target species, leafy, in this case leafy spurge, the biology of the beetles, which we just went through, and then a quick guide on how to prepare for a release if you order through us, and how to move the beetles once they've established in your area. So since I've explained a bit of their biology to you, I'd like to show you a quick video on how to collect leafy spurge beetles. So Caitlin, whenever you're ready, I am as well.
Here's a quick view into our leafy spurge beetle biocontrol collection and release. To begin, we need to collect leafy spurge beetles for release on leafy spurge plants. This uses a sweep net to collect those beetles. Lots of sweep netting. After a long day of collection, we need to dump the samples into our collector, which will include insects like the beetles, grasshoppers, ladybugs, all those kinds of guys. Dump those in to separate the beetles from the other insects. Here's an example of one collection, and you can see how tiny all the little beetles are. Once we get a sample, we release them into a new population of leafy spurge. No anticlimactic, but that's it.
Thank you. So yeah, we filmed a little quick reel last summer to kind of show the general public a snapshot of our field work when collecting these biocontrol agents, and to promote orders. So this video caught a lot of attention from several organizations, including the Invasive Species Council in Oahu, Hawaii. So that was pretty cool to see.
Oh, Paige, we can't hear you right now.
Oh,
Are you still there?
yep.
Okay, perfect. Sorry.
Should I go back?
I think we lost you shortly after the video. I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay. I'll just start from here.
Okay.
Thanks. So yeah, we filmed this quick reel last summer to basically show our field work to the general public, how it kind of works when collecting biocontrol agents, specifically for leafy spurge, and then kind of just to promote orders for us as well. This video caught a lot of attention from several organizations, so one of which was the Invasive Species Council in Oahu, Hawaii, so that was pretty cool. So as you saw, after collecting, we release the agents into an infestation of the pest species, in this case, leafy spurge. And for leafy spurge, they require specific site properties for good establishment. Those would be full sun, away from any tree canopy, a patch size of about 20 meters squared, either east or south facing slopes, which provide shelter from winds, 10-meter buffer from any herbicide treatments, and we tend to avoid floodplains or find a high water mark, as saturated soils can be pretty detrimental to the beetle larvae. So last year, we released a total of 41 orders of leafy spurge beetles. One order or container, as you saw, is approximately 2,000 beetles. So if we were to tally that up, that'd be about 82,000 beetles released just last year. These orders were placed by 8 different collaborators. So again, this includes municipalities, nonprofits, individual landowners, just a mixed bag. We also introduced a training component to the program this year. So landowners or any organizations that ordered releases could participate. We would show them how to collect the agents. So with the nets there, the sweep netting, we would show them specific site requirements for release, how to release them, move them, and monitor the agent for years to come. So that handout that I showed you, kind of the how-to release guide in the slides before, also attached on this webinar handout, has a little bit of information on that, and that's what we would provide in our little training session. As well, we're in the works of creating a best management practices guide for leafy spurge that we hope to have out for this summer. So overall, biocontrol is extremely useful and can make a huge difference in controlling invasive species, especially in areas that herbicides, so areas near water, or other methods, maybe hand pulling, isn't so feasible and may not be the most effective tool. So as you can see on the screen here, we have an area in southern Alberta called Pincher Creek. Within 5 years after a release, a completely infested field of leafy spurge has dwindled to little to no plants. So all from the releases of those tiny little beetles. So although we just went through the biocontrol program for the council, it should be noted that biocontrol is not the only control option available for invasive plant species, and definitely not the most common, especially since not all plant species have biocontrol agents available. So we can use biocontrol, as we've been talking about. Part of the reason that invasive plants do so well is because they lack natural predators in their habitat. Introduction of a natural pest, often from where the invasive plant originated, has a stringent selection process to avoid damage to non-target species, but can be very effective. So herbicides or chemicals are also an option, and definitely the most common means of controlling invasive plants. We have mechanical means, so mowing, burning, mulching, competitive planting, hand pulling, cultivation. Definitely lots of options there. We also have grazing or grazers. Invasive plants should never be considered forage for livestock, but there are instances where animals, usually sheep or goats, can be trained to eat certain species. And actually, leafy spurge is one of those species. But there's no one-size-fits-all with control. So we recommend using an integrated pest management approach or a combination of various control options. which we find best for plant infestations. Of course, it depends on the effectiveness, timing, economics, location, the plant itself, and so many additional factors. So definitely take into consideration all options and everything about the plant and area you're trying to work with. So yeah, requires a huge decision-making process to manage the pest in the most effective and economic fashion. But we strongly encourage taking that integrated approach to ensure that all those factors are being considered and the best possible outcome can be achieved. So to summarize our little talk here, invasive species come in a variety of forms. You name it, invasive plants, animals, diseases, they can become invasive sometimes. The goal here is that these species are considered invasive when they cause harm to their new environment. About us, the Alberta Invasive Species Council, we're here to serve you. So we strive to educate individuals on invasive species in the province with our various campaigns and programs. One of those programs being the Biocontrol release program. So Biocontrol is just one of those options to use when controlling invasive species. This uses natural enemies to suppress populations of the target pest species. The council offers 5 different agents for 2022. So that would include leafy spurge beetles, Dalmatian toadflax weevils, Russian knapweed gall wasps, as well as spotted and diffused knapweed root and seedhead weevils for release. We plan to grow this program by offering additional agents in the future, 2 of which we kind of passed over, but will be discussed at our conference. Again, grab your tickets. And those agents are for oxeye daisy and common tansy. So when developing a control program or strategy, we recommend using an integrated approach to consider all possible factors. I just wanted to give a big shout out to the Alberta Conservation Association, who has supported us through multiple grants, allowing us to continue this program, as well as create new resources like that how-to guide that I showed you and the best management practices guide that will be coming this summer. Further, the research scientists and team over at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and Lethbridge for doing all the legwork when it comes to researching these agents and the years and trials that it requires. And an honorable mention to our supporters in the field, the agricultural fieldmen and individual stakeholders that help promote and support this program and have throughout the years. And also a big thanks to you guys for listening. If you're interested in learning more about the program, about the Invasive Species Council, you want to inquire about biocontrol orders or any general invasive species or biocontrol questions, here's a few ways that you can reach me. I also will say that if you'd like to hear more about us, to please sign up for our newsletters. We send out about 4 a year, and it's a great way to just keep in touch, or give us a follow on any of our social media accounts. We do our best to post a lot and make some fun of it with some puns. So if you're interested in that at all, there's our links. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. You're a wealth of information, and there's some really interesting things that you said there. It was a really, really great presentation. We have some comments and questions from our listeners here, so I'll just kind of rapid fire them at you, and if you want to flip back to your slides to answer anything, go for it.
Okay. Sure.
So the first one here from a listener named Sonia: what happens to the biocontrol insects after they attack an invasive species? Since they don't attack other species, does the population die out after the invasive plant is eradicated from a site, or are they collected later?
So a little bit of both, I would say. If the population is really big, they will continue to move around and eat. But with these insects, they have a short life cycle. So within a summer, they will come from the soil, the larvae, go up to the plant and feed, and then burrow back down have their larvae, and then cycle over again. So if there's no food for them to eat, they will die off. But if you notice that before your population dies off, obviously you're not going to collect them all at once. So even collecting a few and then moving them to a new location would help extend that population.
Awesome, that's really interesting. Thank you. Are there any examples of biocontrol methods for invasive invertebrates or vertebrates rather than just plants? Do you know of any?
Good question. I don't know of any. Last year was kind of my first year with biocontrol, and it was all plants so far, but I can't imagine that that's probably not something, or that they wouldn't be researching that. Definitely a good idea.
Yeah. And Kendra is wondering, is there a place to prevent greenhouses, or what is there in place to prevent greenhouses from selling possible invasives, or even just invasives in general?
Yeah, so we have our three, I guess, weed control acts, or our acts that we have. So the Weed Control Act, the Fisheries Act, and then the Agricultural Pest Act. So those kind of regulate specific species, but they aren't always overseen when they're coming in. So flowering rush, which was on the first few slides there, it actually used to be sold, I think it was 2012 in Canadian Tire and Home Depot as a horticultural plant. So obviously these plants are just kind of coming in as well. We have like online for pets, plants, you name it, they can come in. Kind of happened with those moss balls this past year. They had zebra mussels in them. So these plants or species can carry other invasives as well as be invasive themselves. So we try to monitor them at the borders, but it's not always seen. As well, if they're ordered and then just brought straight into the store, nobody's always looking at those acts. So kind of happens that you have to go in and see it and then take it off, which is unfortunate, but
Yeah. Is there a place to report something? Like, let's pretend I go to my local store and I buy some wildflower seeds, and then I look at it and it has baby's breath or another species that I know is invasive. Like, what is the best thing to do when you see it in a garden center or nursery?
I would for sure like take a photo of for the seeds at least, and make sure that double check online that it is invasive. With those seeds packs specifically, it's cool that you brought it up because there is a lot of mixed bag in there, and they don't always know when you're sprinkling them out in your field or wherever.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would report it to the provincial government. They'll be able to take the most authority, talk to the manufacturer, talk to the person that is selling those seeds, take them off the shelves. But honestly, just tell someone. So you could tell us, you could tell the Saskatchewan Invasive Species Council or the government. One of those resources will be able to help you get those off the shelves.
Awesome. That is good to know. Thank you for that answer.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few more questions here. So Alexandra is asking, goat grazing is becoming a popular technique for invasive species removal. How effective is goat grazing compared to the use of beetles, specifically for leafy spurge?
I think it depends on your area and the time that you want to get rid of this. Obviously, quicker is better, but with the goats, it requires training. It also requires like a shepherd, more or less, to be with this species the whole time. So I know in red deer in central Alberta, there was one population that of leafy spurge that they had goats come in, but they had a shepherd there for like months at a time, just monitoring this population. So with managing plants, it depends on so many different factors, like the area, the plant you're trying to control. Every little thing needs to be considered when you're making your plan. As well, you could even do the combination. So with biocontrol, they could latch onto the fur of the goats. Some of them will obviously have a few mortalities by the goats eating, but some of them will move to different further locations. I don't know that there's really a best one for management. It depends on what you're controlling and where you're controlling and every single other factor. So.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer. And a listener named May is wondering, she comments that biocontrol development is very nice for Alberta. How can we spread it as far as Manitoba?
I mean, we could do a little bit of a road trip. No, I think just letting the Manitoba Council know, or even the Manitoba government, they might have something in the works too, like the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and Lethbridge. It's a federal department there, so if they're doing research plots in Manitoba, maybe you could collect from there as well. I would try to get in touch with one of the agents over there, or yeah, your council in your area.
Okay, that is good to know. And I know, like, I'm in Saskatchewan, and I know that we have some leafy spurge biocontrol happening here too. So maybe it just hasn't made its way as far east yet, but I think those are some good resources. And May, if you have any other questions, maybe you can touch base with Paige directly then, and it'd be great to spread this across the prairies.
Yeah, sure.
May also commented, she said, need to trace back the information about spurge being poisonous to cattle. In Manitoba, the beef and forage initiatives are training cattle to eat spurge since 2016, and there's no deaths yet. Do you have any comments about that or any thoughts?
I don't really. I just, from my knowledge over the past year, it's just that sheep and goats, their stomachs are a little more prone to plants that have this kind of toxic, but I think if cattle are eating it, they might be mixing it with another plant. It probably wouldn't be just leafy spurge as their diet, but this is totally an assumption. So sorry, no, I don't really.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting comment, and that might be something worth looking into, what they're doing there, and it's working well. And yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing that, May. So Adam is wondering, what options are there for Canada thistle?
Canada thistle. I don't know of any in the works,
Okay.
but for biocontrol at least.
Mm-hmm.
I would say herbicides, chemicals, with invasive plants specifically, for like the Alberta Weed Control Act, the differentiation between noxious and prohibited noxious is prohibited would mean you must eradicate. Noxious would mean you have to contain it. So you want to control and make sure it doesn't spread further. So with Canada thistle, this is listed as a noxious for Alberta. Could be different where you are, but with that one, we just want to contain the spread majority. So I would say hand pulling herbicide would be the most effective at the moment.
Thanks. Thanks for that answer. Stephen is wondering if you sell out of biocontrol agents, and when is the best time to order them?
So we do it kind of as a first come, first serve basis. Obviously, we can't really pre-count how many beetles are going to emerge or how many we're going to collect. We've never been able to not complete an order, and we've had up to like 50 orders in a year before, specific just for leafy spurge even. So, and that's in addition to the other agents. We've never not been able to complete an order, but I think it depends on the window that we're collecting. So if we came a little bit too late in June or July, or sorry, the collecting is June and July. If we came too early in June, maybe we wouldn't be able to get as many. If we came too late in July, started into August, those agents would already be going down into the soil and laying eggs. So it kind of just depends on the window. And then, yeah. Sorry, I forget. I think I'm going over the question now.
Do you ever sell out the
sell
biocontrol?
out.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we've ever sold out. Yeah.
And so
we've always
when
been
is the best
able
time
to complete the orders.
That's awesome. When is the best time for someone to order them?
As soon as possible, because
Okay.
we will start going out middle or early June just to check on everything, at least for leafy spurge. For the other agents, they start a little earlier. So We're still researching kind of the collection processes for it because, as I mentioned, the coordinator moved on to bigger and better things. So we're trying to make it work. But so far in my research, we've found the agents for the other ones will be up as early as May. So ideally now for the orders.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that answer. Just a couple comments about Canada thistle. From various listeners, there used to be a thistle stem mining weevil that I've used with limited success in Alberta. Have you had any luck with that at all, Paige?
Oh, very cool. No, I have not. I have not worked with that or heard of it. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, as I mentioned, I'm really new to the biocontrol. So leafy spurge is the only one that I dealt with, and that was this past summer. And then this summer, we're trying to work with the other 3 or 4 agents there, figure out those collection protocols and stuff. So, yeah.
Awesome. And another listener, Amanda, says that she saw a presentation at CLRA about training cattle to eat Canada thistle and having success with it. So,
Oh, right on.
yeah, there's something in the works there. So that's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing, Stephen and Amanda. So Luann from Manitoba has done, she says, Manitoba has done several projects on biocontrol on leafy spurge, and there have been releases in southern Manitoba. Funding for the group that worked on this has disappeared, and changing people means the group is not as functional. So it sounds like there's something happening over there, and maybe May, if you're there, you can connect with Luann, another one of our listeners, and yeah, see if there's some possibility to get something going in Manitoba, because this sounds really amazing. And then just regarding leafy spurge, Kendra has written in, what I understand is more of an irritant than a poison. Also apparently dried out, it's high protein if you're desperate. So that's some comments about, yeah, I did not know that. So thank you for sharing, Kendra.
I've also noticed, like for myself, I don't find it very irritating on the skin, but it depends on your person.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to know. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have from listeners right now. And your screen is still up with your email address there and the website. I should mention to our attendees, if you check out the handout section, there's a list of resources available, and the Alberta Invasive Species Council has some really cool stuff going on. This conference that you keep mentioning, Paige, sounds really awesome. Sounds like things there. Yeah.
What conference?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Paige, for joining our speaker series today and giving such a detailed presentation about biocontrol. It was really fascinating, and this is a topic that we don't talk about enough, and we need to address more. So thank you. To all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for catching our broadcast. We have another one coming up in April, and definitely check out the PCAP website. Who's got the Goods Week is next week, and we have 6 webinars about ecological goods and services. So, they're all free. You can just register through the PCAP website. And Paige, there's a few people that have written in, thank you for this presentation. Great job. Keep up the good work. And I'm registered to attend the conference, says Stephen. So I just want to pass those comments on to you. So thank you so much again, Paige.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
And yeah, this webinar is being recorded, so it'll be uploaded to YouTube in the near future, depending on my internet bandwidth and how fast I can get it up there. And then when you leave this presentation, there'll be a quick 1-minute survey. If you don't mind filling it out, then I actually use all of that information to report back to our funders. And I go through it for topic ideas for what people would like to see covered in our speaker series in the future. So we definitely take those into consideration. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.